Hello, I'm Gail Whiffen-Coyle, Associate Editor of Friends Journal, and today we're doing an author chat with Richard House, who is an author in the current November issue, special issue on books and writing. Richard's article is the Quaker Points Game on page 24, and this is the first installment of Friends Journal's new Friends and Business Department. Thank you for joining me today, Richard.
Thanks, Gail. Nice to be here.
So Richard has rehabbed and rented properties in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he joins us today for the past 24 years. He also serves on Friends General Conference's Development Committee and on a number of committees at his local meeting, which is Community Friends Meeting in Cincinnati, including the Stewardship and Nominating Committees. So a very active Quaker at his meeting and in his business.
I get 2 extra points for that.
Yes. So that's great. Explain the Quaker Points Game and how someone might earn or lose points.
Oh, well, the idea came at Friends General Conference this last year, where beforehand we had a couple of days of Quakers in business, and we had a number of conflicting ideas about what was business and how we were defining different things as Quakerly or not. And it came to me, wow, we give out positive points all the time for the wonderful things we do and amongst Quakers, for great food at the potlucks and for serving at first day school, for being the clerk, for all the jobs that take extra energy. But we don't really talk about in our own way of the things that we kind of give negative points to. And so some of those things were, if somebody likes, collects firearms, they get kind of negative points, or smokes cigarettes. Or we have things, even some people drinking alcohol. Oh, lose 2 points today because I wanted a glass of wine after work, So there's things we give the negatives and positives. And I was very aware of, getting negative points for having a business. Especially with the amount of publicity Occupy has gotten over the last number of years, that anybody with a business has sort of been painted as bad or evil. And so wanted to kind of address that in this article, and wanted to do it in a way that was tongue-in-cheek, because we like to laugh at ourselves as well. And so that's how the article came about. And I think my editor did an excellent job of putting together, both the letter that Lee and,
Riley Robinson.
Yeah, Riley and Lee and I had put together, as well as, what I felt were my leadings of things we had to change to address in a positive way, just our images as business people, because Quakers approach business from a different view, I think, both historically and in the present, than the business that you look at of Verizon or Time Warner or some of these big companies that you could call and they just don't care. When you look at Quaker businesses, we tend to be smaller, we tend to be personal, and we follow with our values.
Yeah, and that's a great lead into my next question. And actually, first I want to just point out in the print issue and online, friends can find little icons that our art director, Alla Podolsky, designed for all of the good points and the bad points in the Quaker Points Game, including owning a business. And there's a little guy with a tie on and holding up money. So she had a good time creating these, and we really like them too. So my next question is actually, you describe your work in your article as being spirit-led, and I think that's really powerful. And you also say you see money and business as just another tool with which to do God's work. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, my current business, I've been rehabbing houses for a number of years. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was on development committee, and we had a speaker, which we do, development does meetings in different parts of the country. And we had a wonderful speaker for the Alternatives to Violence program who had been incarcerated, who was talking about how difficult it is to being somebody coming out of prison to get a job, to get anything. He said you could legally discriminate on housing, on work, on everything. And he said the best thing anybody could do is to hire an ex-felon. And I'd kind of retired at that point from rehabbing the houses, feeling I had enough, and had called a person who I knew who had been an ex-felon who'd worked for me some years previously, just to check on him. He had worked for me for a year, earned enough money, bought his tools, bought a truck, and went off on his own. I kind of felt, wow, he graduated. Well, when I called him, he said, Rich, I wish I'd never left working with you. I mean, it was something regular. We thought we'd go out and make a killing. We were going to do this addition on a house, and it didn't work. The building inspectors tore us apart. We'd underbid it. We ended up working 6 months on something and ended up working for nothing. And he was kind of devastated. He said, and he didn't have, he said he didn't feel comfortable calling me back and asking to come back. So I told him about the Alternatives to Violence, and I said, well, what about trying to work with some other ex-felons, and I'd get a house, we could fix it up, and maybe they could live in it. So he said, okay, he loved the idea. He said, I'd love to do that kind of work. And so the two of us sort of embarked. He screened about 5 different people. I met with the sheriff, and I met with the head of probation office, and they all kind of said, you can't really do this. These are all just, incorrigible people. There's no hope. There's, especially sex offenders, and he said, there's just no hope here. So we started off with 6 people, and we started fixing up a house and painting another house. And 2 of the guys, they were all men. 2 of the guys, one knocked off a convenience store and another did something else equally stupid, went right back to jail, and said this is, they said in many ways it was easier for them to be in jail than it was to be out and working. I mean, we kind of had to teach them, what work really was, and some of these people that had never had a job in their lives, that, where you had to go from maybe 9 to 4. So we work with that. So now I've kind of tried to not save the whole world, but stayed with 3 people who have been incarcerated and are out and are steady. They want to work. One of them's got an alcohol issue, and we know that. He knows that. But we work with them anyhow. We love them. And part of it's love, is saying, hey, I care, they care, and we work as a team. I'm out there working with them. They've got most of the skills now. I lent 2 of the guys money to buy their own houses in the last year. So we bought, houses from the bank. They're fixing them up on their own time. And so that's sort of some of what we're doing. I had a real issue because one was a sex offender. And when the postcards went out, I had a couple of tenants of mine in the same neighborhood, because he only lives 4 blocks from me, say, Richard, the guy who's been mowing our lawn is a sex offender. And so I talked to her and I said, do you want to meet him? I know his story, and she said, Rich, I trust you, and I don't really want to sit down and talk to him. But because I trust you and you've rented, to me and my mom for 10 years, I know the kind of person you are. So I'm not going to make any bones about it. But I just worried when I saw that postcard came out and I recognized the guy who mows the lawn. And so we've had these dialogues, and the same person was able to, we did a nonprofit, we built 200 gardens in our neighborhood. So we had a grant for that, and he worked with that group, and he was one of the people who would haul the soil, build them, and he became an essential part of the neighborhood doing this. He got to know a lot more people. There were a bunch of volunteers, one of the volunteers, and he kind of fell in love, and so now, they're an item. And wow. So it's really a positive story that's all come about through, and I feel it's God and love that makes it all work.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. That's sort of like you're the the spokesperson, the liaison for these people. You work with them daily, and you see the potential in them. And it's not as if like you even need to do that to make your business work, but it's a part of enriching your business and making the connection with these people and integrating them back into the community.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you are a part of the newly formed Quakers and Business Group. Could you just briefly describe that group and its goals?
I think everyone you ask it to will probably have a slightly different sense of it right now because we're still trying to get a handle on what we can do here in the States. I've talked to a friend who has been in England where they have a more organized group.
Right, and they're also called Quakers and Business Group, but
exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they have have a written pamphlet that ties into their faith and practice about how important business is to Quakers and historically and in the present. And so they have a pamphlet about business and faith and practice. As a good friend of mine has said, without profits, there are no nonprofits. And we are a nonprofit as a religious organization. So, my idea for Friends in Business was to offer support for other people in business. Because after we had the workshop, the get together, I had a number of friends who came to me at gathering who said, "Wow, Rich, I'm affected by." One was a therapist who said, "I'm affected by what's happening with the changing healthcare, but there's nobody who has businesses in my meeting. Everybody's an educator or social worker or works in other areas, and I'm just wondering how." Because I said, "Well, could you get a clearness committee in your own meeting?" He said, "No, there's nobody there really to talk to, and who would you suggest I talk to?" And so I'd like to kind of reset up that support committee that as early Quakers used to have when we could only be business people. When Quakerism first started, you were a farmer or you had a small business. And I think we've lost that connection that we used to have, both in our meetings and just support with other businesses.
Great. I think my picture might be frozen, but you can still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay. Well, wonderful. So Quakers in Business Group, it's a place to connect and share stories, much like the new Friends in Business Department.
I think partly, too, is the support. I think it's important to realize, like in my meeting, I would usually say, "Oh, I'm a carpenter," or "I fix up houses," and try to, be very low-keyed about business because in some Quaker circles, business gets a bad rap. I mean, everybody looks at the 1% and all the horrible things that are going on the nationwide level with businesses. And so it always served me to stay quieter. So it's kind of like coming out of the closet a bit about saying, hey, business is important. We do good things. We're not all awful people. But I hear more other business people who kind of feel that, especially with the Occupy movement over the last 5 years, that felt, wow, I really need to kind of keep under the Quaker radar that I run a business because, it gets such bad press all around Quakerdom.
Okay. Well, we look forward to hearing more stories from Friends in Business in the new Friends in Business department in Friends Journal. So readers should look out for that. Thank you for talking with me today, Rich.
You're welcome. I hope it's been useful.
Yeah, it has.
My first time on a webcam.
Oh, wonderful. You did a great job. And
Thanks.
friends can read Rich's article, again, The Quaker Points Game, in the current November issue. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Gail.
Thank you.